Okay, so tonight we're talking about drones. This is supposed to be a relatively high level introduction to drones, but as you'll see, we'll get into a pretty good amount of detail. So, hopefully by the end of the class, you know more about how drones work, what kind of drones to fly, and how to use your drones. Here's what we're planning on covering. We'll talk about types of drones, and then we'll go over at a high level what kind of skills you have for drones. There are a whole bunch of drone skills. And then we'll also talk a little bit about some of the modules and implants you can use to improve drones. And last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about how do you actually use your drones. And this is particularly essential for the fleet that we've got coming up after. So we'll practice a little bit in the practical with using drones. And then once we've had a chance to practice, we will go out and actually shoot some people with drones. So it should be a good time. And there will be time for Q&A at the end, but you're also welcome to ask me questions throughout. So feel free to jump in with questions and I'll either answer them or kick them down to the end. Alright, so types of drones. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of different types of drones. The drones we use the most often are combat drones. They come in flavors by faction, so Caldari, Gallente, Minmatar, and Amarr. And they come in light, medium, heavy, and Sentry, T1, and T2. There's also Navy and faction drones. We also have combat utility drones, energy neutralizers, and electronic warfare drones. So we've got tracking disruption, stasis webifying, target painting, sensor dampening, and ECM. And of the combat utility drones and electronic warfare drones, really the only ones that we ever use are the ECM drones. Now, it might seem like a really cool idea to have an E-war drone, but in practice, for example, a light stasis webifying drone only does a 5% reduction in speed, so it's a 5% velocity reduction, as compared to 50% for a stasis webifying module. And the stacking penalty applies. So if you have a full flight of 5% stasis webifying drones, you do not get 25% webifying. Instead, you get something closer to 13 or 14% stasis webifying, which is barely useful. And the same is generally true for the other types of combat utility and electronic warfare drones, except for ECM, because ECM is binary. Either you jam or you don't. And so having a full flight of ECM drones gives you 5 times the chance to jam. So you'll see ECM drones a lot of the time on boats so people want to be able to crowbar themselves out of tackle and get away. And sometimes I'll fly them on my boats just to be mean, really. Then we've got logistics drones. They come in armor, hull, and shield, T1 and T2, and then they light, medium, and heavy. And there's a couple different types of mining drones as well. You've got civilian mining drones, which you really shouldn't be using. And then Tech 1 and Tech 2 mining drones and ice mining drones. And last but not least, there are salvaging drones, Tech 1 and Tech 2. Now, what about fighters? Well, technically, fighters are not drones. You can't put them in a drone bay. You can't use them with a normal drone ship. You have to use them in a carrier or in a structure. They do come in light, heavy, and E-war, and they do come different for each faction. But fighters are really beyond the scope of a drones class. We're not really going to be flying those. And if you are planning on flying a carrier or defending a structure with fighters sometime soon, you'll need to get a more advanced class than this one. So feel free to reach out to me and we'll find somebody who can help you out with that. But that's not what we're covering today. Alright, let's talk a little bit more about combat drones. So they come in 4 different varieties: light, medium, heavy, and sentry. This is going to come as a shock to you all. But light drones are smallest and fastest, but have the worst damage. They are great against frigates and destroyers. And then medium drones, believe it or not, are intermediate between light and heavy. So they are slower than light drones, but do better damage, and are most useful against cruisers and battle cruisers. Heavy drones do the highest damage, but are slow and don't track very well, and are really sort of only useful against battleships unless your ship has got a hull bonus to drone tracking or something like that. And then sentry drones are the same size as heavy drones.
What about battle cruisers?
So you can actually do reasonably well against battle cruisers with heavy drones if you've got faster heavy drones and it's a slower battle cruiser. But if it's a battle cruiser that's moving pretty quick, you're going to really struggle with heavy drones. Against NPC battle cruisers, probably going to work. Against like an overpropped Myrmidon, is not going to work. And most battle cruisers like Shield, Nano Fits, not so good. You want medium drones for that. Whereas heavy armor fits, yeah, you can probably use heavy drones. Can I answer your question? The finer nuances of drone selection are many. Sentry drones, as mentioned, same size as heavy drones, but they don't move. They're like sniper turrets. You drop them, they sit where they are, and they shoot targets preferably far away, although they can hit battleships up close. But yeah, they're really nice for sniping and staying at longer range. Now, one thing worth noting, especially about light drones, once you get up to like battleship-sized ships, almost every battleship has got a drone bay of some variety, usually enough to at least field a full flight of light drones. And that's really for defending yourself against frigates and destroyers, because a lot of battleship-type weapons are cannot really hit effectively against frigates and destroyers due to tracking or due to explosion velocity for missiles. So your flight of light drones is there to blap those annoying frigates and destroyers that are swarming around you while you shoot the bigger targets with your guns or your missiles. So once you get into big ships, like I said, pretty much all of them carry at least a flight of light drones, if not room for more. Drones do damage based on their faction. So Amarr drones deal EM damage, Gallente deal thermal, Caldari deal kinetic, and Minmatar deal explosive damage. And inverse speed to drone or damage ratio as well. So Minmatar drones are the fastest but deal the lowest DPS, then Amarr drones, which are the second fastest, the second most DPS, then Caldari, and then Gallente drones are the slowest with the highest DPS. And T2 drones are just 20% more effective across the board than T1 drones. So it's definitely, once you get to T2 drones, it's worth the train. They don't take up any more space, there's no problem with fitting like there is with other T2 modules. They're just straight up better. Navy drones are slightly better than T2 drones. You can also get faction drones, but they end up being a lot more expensive. So generally we use T2 drones. So, question, how much of the reason why E-War drones are bad is because of the stacking penalty? I think it's maybe half the reason why they're bad. Half the reason is that they just don't do very much to start out with. So like I mentioned, a light webifying drone only does 5% velocity reduction, which is hardly useful at all. And even a heavy webifying drone is only 20% velocity reduction. And there's similar issues with the other types of E-War drones where their E-War is not nearly as effective as the corresponding ship modules. So they're seldom used for that reason. Does that help?
Let's say you were tackled by NPCs. Which drones would you want to use to escape, for example?
Damage.
Damage drones are jam drones.
And the
ECM
jam
drones.
ones are which ones? Which ones are the ECM?
Caldari ECM drones. So they're the Caldari electronic warfare drones.
But if you're
Okay,
tackled
thank you.
by NPCs aren't subject to E-War. Usually, most NPCs can't be jammed, so you'd have to use damage drones.
Yeah, that's pretty much your only hope is to blow them up.
Ah, I see.
Jam drones are good against players who sneak up on you and tackle you. let's talk a little bit about drone skills. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but the most important drone skill, get ready, is drones. Because once you have drones 5, you can operate a full flight of 5 drones. Until you're at drones 5, for most holes you're going to be limited to less than the optimal amount of drones for that hole. So you want to train up to drones 5 sooner rather than later. Really useful skill for flying drone boats, and also a really useful skill, like I was saying, for flying like battleships or battle cruisers, so you can put a full flight of light drones on there and zap smaller targets with them. I think the other standout here is drone avionics, which increases your drone control range, so you can get more distance on your drones, you can send them out further. And then the other skills are all useful to varying degrees. Drone interfacing is nice because it gives you more damage, as do the light drone, medium drone, heavy drone, and sentry drone skills. A couple more skills here. You can get faction drone specialization skills, so like Caldari drone specialization, which lets you fly Tech 2 drones from that faction and increases their damage. And then you can also get advanced drone avionics, which gives you access to E-War drones and also increases your drone control range by a little bit. And then there are some mining drone skills that you can pick up as well. How about modules for drones? There's a couple. The DroneLink Augmenter, you'll see people use, sometimes they'll put one of these on a ship. It gives you a big bonus to drone control range, which can be useful, especially if you want to try to snipe with your ship, fly at long range, you can send your drones out further. Because you have, in addition to your targeting range, you've got drone control range, and that's how far your drones will roam away from your ship. You can't send drones any further than your drone control range, so adding 20 kilometers to that is pretty useful. In the mid slot, you can get a drone navigation computer, which is not very useful. It increases drone's micro warp drive speed. So what a drone does is when you launch it and then send it after a target, it turns on its micro warp drive and it burns out to the target with its micro warp drive. Then it'll turn off its micro warp drive in orbit. This is obviously aside from sentry drones, which just sit there. But for other drone types, they burn out with the micro warp drive, then they turn it off and they orbit. So having extra micro warp drive speed means they get to the target faster, but it doesn't mean they necessarily, they don't pursue it any faster, they don't orbit any faster. And so what you'll find is that even against really fast targets where you think, oh yeah, my drones should go faster, they'll micro warp drive out, and then turn off the micro warp drive and try to orbit, and the target will burn away from them. They'll turn the micro warp drive back on, burn out again, turn the micro warp drive back off, the target will burn away from them. So it doesn't really help very much even against fast targets. So it's not a very useful module.
Would it
It's mainly
be useful
used
for
with carriers.
Yeah, so for carriers it's a whole different matter. You can throw some drone navigation computers on there and have a good time. But not so much for normal drone boats. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
I was asking if it would be useful for like a mining barge that was using mining drones.
So, I mean, I guess maybe if you want your drones to get to the target faster and you don't have anything else to put in your mid slots. But if you're going to be swapping rocks a lot, that might be useful. But if your drones are just going to be sitting on the same rock for a while, then not really. They don't need extra warp drive speed to do that.
Yeah, if you're flying a mining ship, your mid slots are better used in shield tank.
So what about omnidirectional tracking link? Another module, active mid-slot module, that is not, unfortunately, particularly useful. For drone optimal range and fall-off range, those can be useful for sentry drones, and that's really it. For normal drones, they're going to fly into the target and orbit at close range within their optimal anyway. So getting a little more optimal range really almost never makes a difference between your drones being in optimal or not. And then tracking speed, some tracking speed can be helpful, particularly with heavy drones shooting lighter targets, or sorry, smaller targets. But in many cases, you are actually better off just launching a flight of light drones instead of a flight of heavy drones if you have a target that's hard to track. So again, not a whole lot of cases where tracking speed is hugely useful. Again, maybe sentry drones, but this module's, in many cases there's something better you can put in your mid slot than an omnidirectional tracking link. Alright, let's talk about a module that is extremely useful. Drone Damage Amplifier. These are fantastic. We've got one of them on the FITs that I'm flying tonight. I'm flying Algoses tonight, and I put a Drone Damage Amplifier on them. The Tech 1 does 15% drone damage, and the Tech 2 gives you 20% drone damage, so you get a huge boost to drone damage out of a Drone Damage Amplifier, and you'll see most drone ratting boats and a lot of drone PvP boats will have multiple Drone Damage Amplifiers equipped to them, particularly if they're shield tanked. A very useful module. Then back to not so useful, we've got the omnidirectional tracking enhancer, which, like the mid-slot tracking computer, gives you some optimal range and fall-off that are really only useful for sentry turrets, and a little bit of tracking speed that is not even enough to make enough difference to be worth equipping. I struggle to think of many cases where you wouldn't be better off putting just another drone damage amplifier on your ship and launching a flight of light drones if you have a target where you are going to need better tracking. How are we doing so far? Everybody holding up?
Yep.
Rigs. So drone rigs, small, medium, large, Tech 1, Tech 2, like every other kind of rig. These are mostly not useful. The exceptions might be a sentry drone damage augmenter and a drone mining augmenter, but there's no damage rig for drones. Drone control range might be useful, but you could probably just use your utility high slot for a navigation computer instead. Increasing drone hit point by 20% really doesn't make much difference at all unless somebody's trying to defang you, and in that case you're going to need a lot more than 20% extra health. So you don't see a whole lot of drone rigs on ships, except maybe if you're trying to squeeze every little bit of DPS out of your sentry drones. But they are there. You can use them. How about implants? Also, not very good. You've got velocity, optimal range, repair hit points, and drone hit points, but the bonuses are so small as to be next to negligible. So, I mean, I don't think these are worth the money. Personally, I would really advocate for any of these drone implants. Even the drone repair hit points one, which is probably the most useful of them. The drone velocity one, maybe arguably second most useful, but like I said, I wouldn't really suggest using these implants. They're just not worth the money. Okay, now to the hard part of the class. How do you use drones? They're not like any other weapon system, so they're not like, just hitting F1 and turning your guns on. In order to use drones, you've got to launch them first. So the default command for launching drones is Shift F. You can also right-click in your drone bay and launch your drones from there. From there, you can use F to send your drones to engage a currently selected target, which can be friendly or enemy. So if you've got damage drones, hopefully you're engaging enemy targets. If you've got logistics drones, hopefully you're engaging friendly targets. Please try to keep that straight. But yeah, F to send your drones out to fight. We'll talk a little bit more about other circumstances in which drones will fight in just a second here. Once you're done fighting, you can use Shift R to recall your drones into your drone bay. So they will come back to your ship and they will get scooped up into the drone bay and they will no longer be in space. If, and this is something I rarely do, but if you want your drones back at your ship, but you do not want them back in your drone bay, you can use Alt and Shift R to have them return to you and orbit your boat. So they'll stop engaging whatever target they're on, they'll come back to you, and they will hang out. And there's no default shortcut for reconnect to lost drones, but what you would end up using this for, the most common thing that'll happen is you'll be in a fight, you'll have your drones out, and your FC will call scatter and warp you out, and your drones will stay behind. So they don't automatically come back to your bow when you warp, they just stay right there on the grid wherever they were. So if you're lucky enough to be able to get back on that grid, you can use reconnect to lost drones to automatically call all your drones that are yours back to you, which is nice because otherwise you have to slow boat out to them and then scoop them into your drone bay and then relaunch them. And then there's no shortcut at all for assigning drones to a friendly ship. And we'll try that a little bit in the practical. The most common thing in the uni I would say you'd see somebody assigning drones for is assigning a fleet of drones to an interceptor that you're using for decloaking during a gate camp. So briefly, if you've got an interceptor trying to decloak, they will zoom toward the place where the ship cloaked as fast as possible in order to try to get within that 2,000 kilometer space where you automatically decloak a ship. Now, if you assign a bunch of drones to that interceptor, the drones will orbit around it, and they create this cloud that dramatically increases the amount of space the interceptor effectively takes up for decloaking, because the drones will also decloak the ship. So
I
that's...
have a question about cloaking.
Yeah.
Does it decloak ships using a Cove Ops?
It will, yeah. Any kind of cloak. Cove Ops, improved, you can decloak them if you get close enough. Just when you thought you were safe, right? So that's what you're most likely to see drones used for, or assigning drones used for in the uni. And some of the really big null block fleets, they'll also have elaborate plans around who is in charge of drones and who's going to send them where. You can then assign drones to somebody who's going to be in charge of all the drones. But we don't really do that. Probably more complicated than it needs to be for us. So I wouldn't worry about that too much until you move out to null. And then you got to start thinking about carriers too. So again, you probably need a different class.
The other use in the uni would be logis that would assign their drones to get on kill mails, and probably incursion drone bodies.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point.
I am notorious for accidentally shooting friendlies when I've a Logi pilot with shooting friendlies with my drones.
Classic. You just got to keep them on their toes, right? So there's some drone commands. Let's talk a little bit more about what happens when you launch drones. So when you hit Shift F and you haven't set up any drone groups or anything else, you just undock your ship into space with drones in the drone bay. You'll get a roughly alphabetical set of drones launched into space when you hit Shift F. If you've got, say, 5 acolytes, and that's what you wanted to launch, you're in good shape. If you've got 5 hornets and then 5 warriors, or 5 hornet EC jam drones and 5 warrior attack drones, you're probably going to launch the hornet jam drones first, which is probably not what you meant to do. So that's bad. And if you're really unlucky, you could actually get a mix of damage logi and E-war drones launched at the same time, which is really bad, because then you're going to start repping and damaging targets and jamming them all at the same time, which is not what you should be trying to do. So what do you do about it? Well, what you're going to want to do is set up a drone group. So what you're seeing here in the screenshot, I've got some Hornet EC jam drones, EC300s, and I'm currently moving those drones into a group called ECM. I could create a new group, or I could move them into the group I already have called Fight, but in this case I'm going to move them into a group called ECM, and they'll be in their own special drone group. Alright, so that's what it looks like when we've got a drone group called ECM that has 6 Hornet EC300s in it. Notice that I've got more than 3 drones, or more than 5 drones in that group, so I've got more than I can launch. And that's okay. You will only be able to launch a maximum of 5 drones if you have drones 5. But if you have extra drones in a group, what that's helpful for is if one of your drones gets blown up, or even if you've got 10 drones in a group and you lose a whole flight because you warp out and leave your drones behind, you can still launch that group and the remaining drones will launch. So it does make sense a lot of the time to have more than 5 drones in a group. Now, what we're looking at here is step 2. In my case, I'm in a fighting boat, so I want fighting drones to go first when I hit Shift F. So I've right-clicked on the fight group, and I'm going to select Mark Group as favorite for launching. And that means that when I hit Shift F, drones from that group will be the drones that I launch first. So that's how you set up your drones so that you get the right group of drones out when you hit Shift F. Go over this in the practical as well, so you all have a chance to practice. Last couple important commands here. We've got drone aggressiveness and focus fire. Aggressiveness is either passive or aggressive. If you got your drone set to aggressive, they will attack anything that attacks you. This is nice if you're jammed because they will continue to fight even when you're jammed. It's also just kind of convenient, so I usually leave my drones on aggressive so that if I'm not really paying attention to them, they'll keep fighting even if I'm doing something else. If they're on passive, they will just sit there until you hit F and tell them to go attack something. Focus fire will tell your drones to all attack the same target. So if you hit F, this is going to happen anyway. You hit F, your drones go attack whatever, or repair whatever target you've got selected. But if you turn on focus fire, even if your drones are on aggressive and they're off attacking targets that you haven't selected, they will try to all attack the same target. So this almost never applies to what I should be doing. Usually I should be hitting F to send my drones to a specific target. So I usually don't leave focus fire turned on, but there's nothing wrong with having it turned on. It's, I think, maybe philosophically a little bit better, a little bit more optimal to use it.
For aggressive, can that be a problem with like gate timers and stuff? Like, couldn't somebody shoot my drone or something and have it immediately shoot them back and prevent me from escaping?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. If your drones are set to aggressive, they will continue to fight. So if you're trying to disengage and your drones are on aggressive, that's bad, like you say. So what I'll usually do is I'll call my drones back in, and that way they'll stop fighting. But you can also set them to passive, and then they'll only fight things that you want them to.
It can also be a surprise trigger in missions.
Yeah, that's also a problem. If you've got a rat that is the trigger that's going to automatically spawn the next wave of rats in a mission or in a site, you don't want your drones to go off and zap that rat, especially if it's like a frigate. So setting your drones to passive means that they won't go out and start zapping the wrong rat. Alright, well, we're at 29 minutes even, so we've got 1 minute for questions. Just kidding. We've got as much time for questions as you all need before we undock for the practical.
Does aggressive cause Logi drones to heal people who attack you, or what does it do for Logi drones?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure. I don't know if they automatically go and heal your allies, or if they just don't do anything. I'm going to go ahead on a limb here and say that they won't go heal your enemies, but this is Eve, you never know.
I haven't ever noticed it do anything.
They probably just don't engage at all.
What about armor repair, energy shield repair, and so forth drones? Are those actually good?
Oh, good question. So that depends to some extent on the hull you're flying. Like with the Scythe, they have...
Let's say a battleship like Dominique's.
You're not going to get a lot of reps out of a fleet of Logi drones, and you can't rep yourself, which is unfortunate. So your Logi drones can only rep other ships. But if you were like trying to spider tank, now if you say take a fleet of 6 Dominics out, and everybody has Logi drones, and 5 of you assign your Logi drones to whoever's getting attacked, yeah, you'll get some reps. But in terms of that being a practical strategy for Logi, it's not really going to work. It's not strong enough reps to be generally worth it. But on a whole like a Scythe, which has a 100% bonus to logistics drones, a full flight of shield drones is basically equivalent to another repper, so a 4th repper, which is pretty nice. So like a bonus chip like that, repair drones are pretty useful.
What faction is that under? The Scythe, I think you said?
Yeah, it's a
That's
Minmatar ship.
Minotaur.
I fly them frequently with Caracals, although Ospreys are the official uni companion to Caracals, and they do not have a drone bonus.
Okay, what are... here you go, found it. Scythe is the cruiser.
Yeah, and if you see, it's got a 100% bonus to logistics drones. Other questions?
Let's say I have a drone boat, right? And I'm doing missions. What you do when you want to have all the damage types but don't have enough space for all of them?
Unfortunately, if you're mid-fight, you're out of luck. What you can do is bring a mobile depot along, and that'll allow you to refit your drones. But I don't know that anybody actually does that, because most missions have got 1 or 2 damage types that you need. So I don't think that situation comes up all that often.
How about on a ship that does not focus on drones? Would you just have the light scout drones?
Yeah, so if you've got like a battleship that has a drone bay that's only 25, only has space for 25 drone slots. Sorry, I think it's meters cubed, maybe it's kilometers cubed. I don't know. Then you would probably just fly a flight of 5 light drones. Although it starts to get into some exciting bits of theory when you have a drone bay that's, say, 50 meters cubed, because then you can look at putting 5 medium drones in there. But then are you going to be able to track frigates with your 5 medium drones? What are you going to do about frigates? Maybe you want 2 flights of light drones. Maybe you want a flight of acolytes, which are light drones, to damage frigates and destroyers, and then a separate flight of Hornet EC 300s, which are jam drones, so that if you get tackled by somebody while you're out ratting, you can try to escape by using your jam drones to jam them off of you. So there's quite a bit of theory crafting that goes into what drones you put on a bigger ship. For little ships, it's usually a lot simpler.
What do you do when you lose a drone? Do you replace it with the same drone so you have 2 flights?
I will usually replace with the same drone that I lost. But losing drones is tough. There's no way around it, and that's not a problem you have to deal with other weapon types, right? So if you've got like the Algoses that we fly tonight, we've got 2 full flights of drones, so we can afford to lose an entire flight of drones to defanging or to warping off or to forgetting them or whatever, and we'll still be able to undock launch a second full set of drones. But if you've only got 5 drones and somebody destroys one of them, then you're kind of in a bad spot. You've got to look at buying another drone. You can look at using a mobile depot if you've got drones in your cargo hold, or in an act of desperation, you can actually go and scoop somebody else's drone that they've left behind, because you can scoop drones that are just sitting out in space into your drone bay. So you can go steal drones from people who lost them and replenish your drones that way.
Scooping faction drones can be quite profitable.
Yeah, you make real money that way.
Especially if you loot a gecko.
Heyo! Best drones, geckos. We didn't cover them here, you'll see.
I've heard
Geckos
that
are
some
pretty special.
people... I've heard that these really special drones that a ship called a Rockwell uses that people bump away on purpose that they then quickly scoop and run away with.
Yes, excavators.
I hear there are a couple billion, some of them, aren't they?
Yeah, so let me see here. Excavator. They can run quite a bit, yeah. And if you kill them, you actually get a kill mail for them. At least I think you still do. They certainly did back in the olden days. So they are, yeah, people will steal them and make money that way. Or if you're a pirate, you might just shoot them for Rinsies. Those, yeah, like you say, they're used with Rorks. They're not used with smaller ships, so you won't see them in space very often until you go out to deep into Sovnal. But they are extra fancy drones. Just not quite like fighters. They don't really work like fighters. They work like drones, but to some extent, since they're only launched from capital ships, they're more of a advanced topic.
They're not used as much as they used to be because, like all mining drones, they have waste now since the changes that happened in December of last year.
Very sad for the people who used to make a living stealing excavators.
Wait, people actually made a living off stealing excavators?
Not a good living, but a living all the same. I think I knew a guy a while back who that was like his hobby. To bump excavators off and steal them. Which seemed weird to me. Like, I think there's a lot of other things that I would rather do in the game than sit around bumping Oracle's drones hoping that he doesn't wake up or she doesn't wake up and scoop them all back up.
Still waiting
And
on
that
the
weird
station
command
games.
destroyer stuff that people do with that.
Yeah. Boosting excavators and other nefarious tactics. Well, I will continue to take questions. We should probably get this practical underway.